All right. Okay, well, my name is Erin. If you don't already know me, I am the director of the Arctic Energy Office, and in partnership with the Alaska Center for Energy and Power at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, I coordinate our monthly hydrogen working group meetings. And I always enjoy this time getting together. Thank you all for flexing with our schedule change. We pushed it back from the first week of the month this year, or this month, because of the Rural Energy Conference in Fairbanks last week, at which many of us were present. So here we are today. We always start out with introductions for people who are new to the group, or people who have been quiet, or people who haven't introduced themselves before, but maybe have been lurking. And so I would love to hand it to anyone who would like to introduce themselves to the crew. And we always ask, after you introduce yourself, to put your contact information in the chat if you're comfortable with that, so people can reach out to you for formal and informal networking. Would anyone like to kick off introductions? Don't be shy, it's a friendly group. At least I think it's friendly.
I'm happy to kick it off, Erin.
Please go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Michelle Rao, and I'm joining from Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory. I met Erin and a few other folks at the energy conference last week in Fairbanks, and I work for High Latitude Energy Consulting, and we work on renewable projects all across the territories in Canada. So in solar and wind, and as well as hydrogen. So I'm working with the government currently trying to identify a hydrogen pilot project that we want to do in the Yukon Territory, and linked up with some other cold areas of Canada where they're either moving ahead on a pilot project or looking at it. So really happy to connect with this group in Alaska and see what you guys are getting up to, get linked into some of your resources and contacts as well. And I will add my contact information into the chat. So thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Michelle. And Michelle told me about a really cool demo facility in Alberta as well. Do you mind just saying a few words about that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So there's this hydrogen demonstration facility in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. And what they've done there is they've established a few things where it's a demonstration of hydrogen natural gas blending. They have a variety of different hydrogen appliances that they show how you use them. They have a whole hydrogen house that is only energized by hydrogen energy. And they also have a fuel cell electrolyzer combo that has been cold weather adapted. It will be commissioned this fall and will have its first winter of operation this year. And then also I never say the word right, the hydrogen plant where it's done with the natural gas to create hydrogen stock. So it's called the Energy Discovery Center, and it's owned by ATCO Gas, and it's open for tours, I think, this fall as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. If you wouldn't mind putting your contact information in the chat and maybe a link to Energy Discovery Center as well. I am seeing a field trip in my future, but that's really exciting to hear about this. And if I'm understanding correctly, because I did a little snooping on the internet, it was the whole pilot center was just commissioned this spring. Is that correct? So it's relatively new.
So that Discovery Center in Fort Saskatchewan. Yeah, and actually only a portion of it was commissioned this spring. I went and did a visit in August, and the electrolyzer and fuel cell had not been commissioned yet. So it was a bit of a staged commissioning approach, but it sounds like everything will be completed probably by now, actually. But yeah, they just started commissioning their initial pieces just this summer. So it is brand new.
So super exciting. Thanks for joining us, Michelle. And I'm so glad you could come to Fairbanks last week. All right, who else would like to introduce themselves? If you're new, or if you've just been lurking and you've been quiet in past meetings, we'd love to meet you, and we won't bite. Dan, go ahead.
Hi, Erin. It's good to see you again. I've been out of this group for about 8 months, 7 months while I went and hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. So I am back now for about 3 weeks. So
that's great. Did you hike the entire trail?
I did. I got injured right away, like day 2, and I was off trail for about 6 weeks rehabbing, and then I got back on in May and finished up in Canada on the 7th of September. So
Congratulations. What an accomplishment.
Highly
These are
recommended.
great updates. Hydrogen pilot plan, specific crest trail. All right, Halen, you've got a lot to live up to.
Hey, everybody. Nice to know everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. We've been having all kinds of tech issues. Great to meet everybody. My name's Halen. I'm with a startup called General Galactic. We're actually part of the Launch Alaska program and connected with Aaron and some other folks working on hydrogen in Alaska recently. Our startup is actually focused on production of synthetic fuels. We do generate hydrogen as part of that process, and we're looking at applications of our tech throughout Alaska and also in Canada. And so, yeah, excited to just kind of lurk on this conversation and think about how we can eventually find a way to apply our tech here.
Terrific. And I forgot to ask Dan and also for Halen, let us know where you're calling in from. Dan, are you
yeah.
Washington? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm in Los Angeles.
You're in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Richland, Washington. And for those who are newer to this group, I work with the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association and the hub, as well as Jamie Holliday, who leads our programs here at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory.
Okay, terrific.
Aaron, we have a new face in the ASAP office here. Go ahead, Glenn.
Hey, I'm Glenn Woodworth. I'm on the data and cyber management team at ASAP. I've been here about a year. My background's in mathematics. I have a master's in mathematics, and right now I'm working on production cost modeling for adding hydrogen to Kotzebue. And that's why I'm here, and I'm working with Mari Shirazi on that.
Okay, terrific. Hopefully you're working with Paul as well. Please, Dan, oh, I see Dan, you've put your info in. Halen, please put your information in the chat as well. I see a hand up for Guy. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Guy Ben-Haim. I'm a CTO and the chief engineer of Dor-Motors. We are a startup based in Israel. And later today, I will present to you about our dual fuel kit for diesel engines.
Wonderful. If you're in Israel, what time is it there?
Almost 11 o'clock p.m. So I'm from home.
That's impressive. Patty, I saw that you muted me for a second.
That was an accident. Sorry.
Okay. All right. She's taking over. Thank you, Guy. Appreciate it. Please put your info in the chat. And I see Joe Stanford's hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, everyone. I apologize. My camera's not working. But I see all you hydrogen discussion. So I'm keen to learn about this. I'm actually the communications lead for the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies office at DOE. So of course we want to know what's going on and sort of monitor things. So I'm happy to sort of lurk in the background as well. But also I would not be doing my job if I didn't wish everyone a happy Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Day. I trust that most of you are aware that today is the official congressionally recognized Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Day, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat to our announcement about that.
Yay.
I'll also put my email in there too.
Yeah, 1.008 is the atomic weight, and I believe there's a 1.008 mile walk somewhere in Washington, D.C. to commemorate this. So if you all feel like getting in the spirit after this meeting, I encourage you to go for a 1.008 mile or kilometer walk on 10/08. That's actually the whole reason we rescheduled this meeting to today. No, I'm just kidding.
And we've had people do bike, run, swim, paddleboard. So any way you want to get 1.008 miles, please do it.
Awesome. Or even 1,008 miles. It's like the
Boy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Hello, Aaron.
Yeah.
Hi, this is
Yes.
Larry Vail. Can you see me?
Yes. Hi, Larry.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, to introduce myself, I'm a principal electrical engineer with ASRC Energy. And I'm kind of attending on my own, but encouraged by management here, because I think this is a really important group and you guys are covering some really good stuff. So I'm going to attempt to make every meeting, and it's been pretty informative so far. So congrats on that.
Terrific, terrific. Appreciate that, Larry. Go ahead and put your contact info in the chat. And also, I'll ask Patty, and whichever one of us gets to it first. For those who are new, I want to just highlight the fact that this group published an Alaska Hydrogen Opportunities Report earlier this spring, which is a great summary of the landscape for hydrogen in Alaska. It's not a roadmap, but it's sort of the precursor to a roadmap. So encourage folks to take a look at that, and we'll get that in the chat as soon as we can. John Bowling, please go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Aaron. Hi, everybody. My name is John Bowling. I'm calling in from Craig, Southeast Alaska. I work part-time for Southeast Conference, mostly on transportation issues, particularly on alternative fuel ferries, which the focus so far has really been on electric ferries. But hydrogen definitely plays a part in the spectrum of fuels for transportation. So that's why I'm tuning in today. And on a personal note, my daughter is a student at UAF, so I enjoy seeing the campus out the window of some of the participants here. So good morning.
Terrific. Thank you so much, John. And please put your contact info in the chat. Appreciate that. And Patty has put the link to the Alaska Hydrogen Report into the chat as well. It's publicly available. A joint product between ASEP, NREL, Arctic Energy Office, and EXP. So really want to bring that to everyone's attention. Okay, let's see here. Bobby, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Bobby. I work for company Hydrogen Technologies. I'm standing here instead of Janet Reiser. She's my colleague, and I report to her. She suggested, hey, it would be really smart for you to come here, check this out, participate on my behalf. I'm new to the energy sector in general. I've only been here 3 months, coming from a Department of Defense and manufacturing background. So focusing my efforts on, everything green. So here I am. Nice to meet you all. Excited to hear what projects you're working on. About it. Oh, and I'm in Dallas, Texas.
All right. Thank you, Bobby. Please put your contact info. Would you mind putting a link to the company in the chat as well? I think that'll help people understand the technology better. And please say hi to Janet.
Got it.
Awesome. Cord, I see your physical hand up.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cord Christensen, City of Sitka Electric Department. I guess Michelle wanted to welcome you, but also something a little bit closer to your neighborhood. If you can find out any information about Fuel Positive and their ammonia hydrogen-based project in Manitoba, that would be appreciated. They have a fuel cell that will run on ammonia. They have a farm that they put some solar cells and other things and are providing both fertilizer and energy for farm usage. So anyway, not much happening here. We're just chugging along. Good to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Cord. I had the pleasure of visiting Sitka in June for some personal time and just fell in love with it. And also congrats to Sitka on the recent hydroelectric award from DOE. I know that's going to go a long ways to shoring up the backbone of the system there. So glad to have you here, Cord. David Clark.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Clark with Alaska Marine Power. I was delighted and a little surprised to see the article that Hal Burton's article made the front page of the ADN this morning. on the renewable energy potential and for hydrogen. That article is also published in the Inside Climate News, and he expects it to be published in the Seattle Times later this week as well. But I hope everyone also captured the article that Hal wrote on geological hydrogen, which features Mark Myers. So I think Hal did a really, really good job on explaining the potential for offshore wind, geothermal, and tidal energy. So.
Thank you, David. And I just put the link to that article in the chat. That was an excellent article. I encourage everyone to read it. It's a really great overview from some of the players in the space, and fun to see names and details and all of that. So thanks for highlighting that, David.
Yeah. And there's another article coming, which is on the short term renewables, which is mainly onshore wind and solar, and then talking about the current gas shortage in the Cook Inlet. So that should be out in the next few days.
Perfect. Send it to Patty or me when that comes out, and we can be sure to distribute it to the rest of the group. Otherwise, everyone just keep your eyes on the local news sources. So terrific. Okay. Any more introductions? Bob B., please go ahead.
Hello, Aaron and the Alaska Hydrogen Group. I just wanted to report that last week we submitted I'll call it a proposal to be part of the DOE's open voucher call, which means that if we're selected to participate, we have access to the DOE labs in an effort to find ways to migrate internal combustion engines that are running diesel, ultimately to run hydrogen when it becomes available, but in the interim, where it's very dear, very expensive, to find ways to integrate it. So actually today's presentation is going to be, right in line with the work that we're doing. So we're hoping that we'll be able to work with a number of the Alaska energy providers, because they are dependent on large diesel engines. And we hope to help find a way to migrate and to make those more efficient and less polluting. So we'll let you know.
Bob, what entity are you representing?
Sorry, Strategic Solutions out of the Seattle area.
Okay, great. Would you mind putting your contact info and any other details in the chat for people to connect with you, please?
Very good.
Thank you for joining us. Kay, I see your hand up.
Hi, so I'm joining from Houston. I am with ExxonMobil, and I'm supporting the Alaska team. I'm very interested in hydrogen. In my prior role, the last 3 years, very engaged in green and blue hydrogen for ExxonMobil as we were working on renewable fuels. And the team I managed helped provide the technology that HIF has used in their renewable gasoline plant in Chile. And of course, the team continues to look for other opportunities with that. So happy to see things going on in the Alaska ecosystem as well, and looking forward to all the monthly meetings.
Terrific. Thank you, Kay. Please be sure to put your contact info in the chat. This also helps us make sure you're looped in with our monthly meeting and distribution emails that Patty sends out. All right, any other folks who would like to introduce themselves or give a quick update on project developments before we yield the floor to our presentation for today?
Hi, this is Brian. Nice to see you. Yeah, making some big progress, working with the Department of Defense, using volcanic basalt minerals to make fireproof, frostproof, antimicrobial, visibility, everything. It's amazing stuff. We're looking at bringing some products up to Alaska, mostly for the textile industry and the high voltage transmission industry, as well as building hydrogen pressure tanks.
Excellent. Appreciate that update. Please put your contact info in the chat so folks can connect with you on those topics. Anything else from folks on the line here?
I do have something. Hi.
Yes, Masha, hello.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see everyone. I just want to say happy Hydrogen Day today.
Thank you. I feel like we need cookies or something. Didn't
Or
think
a
of that.
Cake.
Cake. All right. Well, everyone can eat their virtual cake. All right. Any other greetings, announcements, updates, introductions? I feel like I see a few new names on here. If you don't speak up this time, you'll have to speak up next time. Weston.
Fine, you've talked me into it. I am just primarily a lurker. I am with DNR Division of Oil and Gas. So I'm got a secondhand invite from my manager, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was working on the CCUS, the carbon capture thing. And I think that's how he got tagged in with the hydrogen project, but also very keen on this Alyeschem project that's happening, especially today. So very interested in today's topic and potentially, as David Clark had mentioned, something about this short-term cook inlet information. That sort of thing is kind of right up our alley.
Terrific. Appreciate you outing yourself there, Weston. And I'll note that Tim put the link to the short-term cook inlet energy resources article in the chat. So just scroll up a bit and you should see that link. Thank you, Tim. And just also a recap, our first monthly meeting of the academic year in September was a joint meeting with the Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage Working Group for Alaska. It was a great meeting because there is a lot of overlap there. You know, we're talking about carbon capture, but we're also talking about, you know, ways to store hydrogen, and the two are intertwined both in storage and production aspects. So happy to have some cross-pollination there, and we may do some more joint meetings in the future depending on topical relevance. Dallas, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Oops, we can't hear you. Please take yourself off mute.
Technical Director of Sound and Sea Systems. We are contracted to ADAC, UAA ADAC, for an assessment of alternative and renewable energy sources for high Arctic communities and activities. The company is just north of Seattle in Mukilteo, if any of you know where that is. We expect to be at both the Anchorage Security Conference and at the Geologic Hydrogen Conference. I just came across the concept of geologic hydrogen recently, and absolutely fascinating. Who would have thunk it? So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Dallas. And ADAC there is not the island in the Aleutians, but the Arctic Defense Awareness Center, I believe, that is also now, I think, merged with the new Department of Homeland Security Center of Excellence, which I believe has a solicitation out on the street for funding. I'll see if I can track that down and put that in the chat for folks, but it's not hydrogen specific. But appreciate that introduction, Dallas, and please put your contact info and organization in the chat, and so we can keep you in the loop and so other people can connect with you. Any other, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I should have made it clear that it's ADAC, not ADAK, and it is Arctic Domain Awareness Center.
Correct. Yes, I'll try to, I was hurriedly looking for a link there and I don't have it up yet. Any other introductions? Updates. Projects. Okay.
Aaron,
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
quick update. I was just down in Houston last week for the Sustainable Aviation Futures Conference. And I was there last year, and a quick notice of the trend there. Last year, hydrogen had much less airtime than it did this year. In particular, Kirk Phillips, who's the director of the Air Force's Office of Energy Assurance, mentioned the work that the USGS is doing on geologic hydrogen, and that the Air Force is interested in determining where across the globe some of that geologic hydrogen could also overlap with their activities, potential fuel, both for their industry, for their installations and for transportation. So hydrogen became a little bit more relevant, I guess you could say, at least with the SAF crowd down in Houston this year compared to last year.
Perfect. Appreciate that update. And I did just add the ADAC Arctic Domain Awareness Center, DHS Center of Excellence link to the chat. I believe there's a funding opportunity, so just click through that a bit. Okay, any other intros or updates? We'd love to hear them.
I have one more. I'm working on building a railroad from Hyder, Alaska to Whitehorse. We have all the funding and the support of the tribes and the government, and everything's all pretty much done. So if anybody wants to do a hydrogen project down there on the end of the canal at the ocean, we're working on the port project too.
Okay. Who are you representing in that effort, Ryan?
The port of Hyder.
The port of Hyder. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great to hear that. All right. Any other updates? And then we're going to hand it over to our speakers. Okay, terrific. Really appreciate everyone sharing their introductions and their projects. Now we are going to hand it over to our presentation for today, and I'm actually going to hand the floor over to JR Wilcox to introduce this. JR heads up Alyeschem, which is working on a methanol plant on the North Slope, and I believe it has a speaker lined up for us on dual fuel engines related to methanol use. So JR, would love it if you could provide some context and introduce our speaker and kick this off for us.
Well, yes, thank you so much. Happy Hydrogen Day, everyone. And a big thanks to Guy for calling in, even though it's the middle of the night in Israel. We really appreciate you, the inconvenience of being on the opposite side of the world from each other here.
No problem.
So I know everybody's got different backgrounds and sort of different depths of time in this committee. And so just to give some context, but not keeping Guy up too much later here. Methanol has been interesting to this committee for some time because it represents the densest form of hydrogen. So as methanol represents a very efficient hydrogen carrier. There's a few different ways to transport hydrogen, obviously, but converting it to something like methanol or ammonia is one strategy. Methanol of the different carriers has some real, technical hurdles and economic hurdles are very, very low at this point. In fact, in Alaska, at least in some of the contexts we're looking at, would be economically advantaged compared to currently using diesel. So it was particularly for large stationary diesel engines, such as we see in drilling operations and remote power generation. There's a pretty strong argument for methanol. We know that this burns in an engine. We know that it improves air quality emissions. It has a lot of other beneficial environmental effects, such as, if you spill it, it doesn't make a slick. It does not gel up in a tank in the middle of winter when it's 50 below. There's a lot lot going for it. So it seemed like the only real hurdle towards deploying methanol in Alaska as a way in order to start moving towards a hydrogen economy was really regulatory. What we found was that you can't just start running hydrogen or methanol in an engine without EPA giving it the certificate of approval, and there's actually a fairly large and expensive process involved in getting certifications for new build hydrogen, methanol, alternative fuel-based engines. So we formed a subcommittee, which we often don't have much to report, but sometimes we do, on what are the barriers in order to deploying hydrogen carriers more broadly for internal combustion engines in the state of Alaska. One thing we have become aware of in that time is that modifying an existing engine is a much more near-term prospect than licensing a new build or importing a true methanol engine. And over the last couple months, we've been talking with Dor and Dor-Motors. While Guy describes as a startup, it's really an arm of a well-established and long-lived chemical company that has been extremely innovative in the area of deploying alternatives and for boilers, for engines. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder from his presentation, but in particular, they have many different technologies that could be brought to bear and would be interesting in Alaska. But the one that seems like it's the most immediately applicable and wanted to share with the group, and very glad that they were able to join us today, has to do with a technology that will allow us to modify existing diesel engines in order to offset some of that diesel use, clean up some of the air emissions, lower operating costs, and has a fairly low regulatory hurdle in front of it. So anyway, we can talk some more obviously after the presentation, but I thought this would be extremely interesting for this group because this is we're not very far from being able to deploy this sort of technology. And with that, I'm honored to turn the floor over to Guy.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for having me today. Thank you to Mr. Wilcox for inviting me. Let me share my presentation and we can begin. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes,
Great.
we can. We see the screen, the slides, and then the sidebar. So if you want to try to put it into presentation mode, you can. Either way works. We
How
don't want
can
to
I do
complicate
it?
things if it's difficult.
Presentation mode. If you can give me a...
I can't read any of those.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see.
Can you just push F5 on your computer?
Yes. Is it okay now?
That didn't change. I thought it would.
Maybe
Maybe it's Shift F5.
Oh yeah, Shift F5 or Function F5. Oh, no, Shift F5. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's it's totally fine like that. I think if you're having difficult. Oh, wait a minute. Now we just lost you. We're back. We lost your presentation. Can you try sharing it again?
Is it
Perfect.
better
You
now?
got it. Yep.
There we go.
Okay. Great, great. We got over our technological hurdle. Okay,
Excellent.
so great. So again, thank you for having me today. I will present, I'm from Dor-Motors as previously described, and I will present to you today our dual fuel technology, what we like to call your first step into the e-fuel revolution. Okay, the core subjects we're going to talk about today: hydrogen and methanol as a hydrogen carrier, dual fuel combustion ignition engines and using alternative fuels or e-fuels in them, the Dor-Motors Dual-Fuel Kit, its economic potential, and I'm going to address emissions and environmental implications as well. Few words about us, who we are. Our parent company, as JR described, is called Dor Chemicals. It's a quite big company, around 300 employees, founded in the early 1960s. It specializes in development, production, and supply of chemicals and energy products. Among these products are methanol, MTBE, and other solutions for chemical, pharmaceutical, and agricultural industries. And most notably, it's Israel's largest company for marketing methanol, MTBE, and hydrogen. Dor-Motors is essentially the innovation arm of the Dor Group, and our focus is on developing uses for methanol and other alternative fuels. We are highly experienced with using methanol as a fuel through various projects we have done over the years. You can see here on the right. The first one is a conversion of a medium-duty truck to operate with methanol. That's the second photo. We also had several projects converting oil burners and gas turbines for combustion of alternative fuels and fuel blends. And on the bottom, you can see the small car. We had a joint project with Fiat Chrysler developing M15, which is a blend of gasoline and methanol, 15% methanol and the rest gasoline. And this resulted in an Israeli standard for that kind of fuel. A few words about myself. As mentioned, I'm the CTO and Chief Engineer of Dor-Motors. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the Technion, which is the Israel Institute of Technology and home to the country's only internal combustion engine laboratory. And my previous experience is in the field of UAV propulsion. Okay, hydrogen and e-fuels. So as you probably know, hydrogen is an attractive alternative fuel. It's common in industrial applications. There is no direct carbon emissions. It can be produced as green hydrogen if you use renewable energy, and can be used in a fuel cell or in direct combustion. However, this comes with several challenges. Hydrogen is a gas at room temperature, so as a gas, it has a low energy density. You can compress or liquefy it, but this is quite complex and energy intensive. Transportation and distribution is also difficult and costly. There is the effect of hydrogen embrittlement on material lifetime, especially if you're talking about metals in engines, etc. And safety concerns, which I'm sure you are familiar with, wide flammability limits, etc. E-fuels, they offer a solution and can serve as a hydrogen carrier. So if you see here on the right of the screen, the e-fuel loop, we can call it, starts with electrolysis of water to produce hydrogen, then separation of CO2 from the environment or another source, a chemical synthesis of the desired fuel, and of course, this process can be green or renewable if green energy is used and carbon is taken from the environment, what is referred to as a net zero carbon cycle. About methanol as a hydrogen carrier. So e-methanol, you can see here the chemical equation to make e-methanol from CO2 and hydrogen. It's considered one of the most energy efficient e-fuels. It is liquid at room temperature. The energy density is about half that of gasoline and used in various industrial applications with established distribution and safety protocols. If we have a look at this table I've added here, let's look at the rightmost column, well to tank efficiency. This means taking into consideration all the losses in the production of the fuel from raw material to the tank, so-called. You can see that liquefied hydrogen and e-methanol have the same efficiency. So what this basically says, this interesting paper that I referenced here, is that you can have the same efficiency for e-methanol or liquefied hydrogen with e-methanol without the headaches of having to liquefy hydrogen and everything associated with that. So that is very attractive. Let's talk about dual fuel combustion in compression ignition engines. So how this is done is an alternative fuel is introduced into the diesel engine, and part of the energy requirement is provided by the alternative fuel, thus reducing the consumption of diesel fuel. There are two types of these systems. First one is what's called the intake manifold injection single point or multi-point at the ports. And this type of combustion is a combination of compression ignition and spark ignition. Or otherwise, it can be implemented in direct injection, directly into the engine cylinder. And this could be some kind of compression ignition or similar to the previous configuration, and it depends on injection timing. A maximum of 40 to 75% of diesel fuel consumption can be replaced. This depends on the fuel, the alternative fuel we're using, and the operating conditions. I want to introduce a typical parameter that I'm going to show in later slides so we can understand it. It's called the substitution ratio or substitution percentage. And what it basically means, you can see it here on the right, it's the mass flow rate of diesel, the engine operating on diesel only, DO, minus the diesel flow rate operating at dual fuel mode for the diesel only. And that is divided by the mass flow rate of the operation on 100% diesel fuel. And what this basically means is how much of the diesel consumption was replaced by the alternative fuel. So this is, if we're talking about methanol, you will see in the following slides, it's described as MSR or MSP. MSR is a fraction, MSP is a percentage, but they mean the same. Another interesting thing is both liquid and gas fuels can be used. So hydrogen gas could theoretically be used directly. If this is of interest, I can talk about the challenges with that later. Please feel free to ask. Okay, so this dual fuel combustion has been studied extensively, and the best results are obtained in the mid-power operating range, about 30 to 70% of rated power of the engine. And this is often the typical operating range for a genset. Now, at the lower limit, we have, let's take a step back. There are two limits to how much methanol, in this case, we can introduce and replace diesel fuel with. There's a lower limit and an upper limit regarding engine power. At the lower limit, we have problems with partial combustion and low combustion efficiency. That means some of the fuel introduced isn't burnt and is like exhausted out. And at the high power levels, we have different problems with pre-ignition or knock, which is something that is harmful to the engine. If we look at this figure here on the right, the x-axis is the MSP, the methanol substitution percentage. The y-axis is engine load in percent of rated power. And we can see best efficiency is at the higher loads. However, your MSP is limited at higher loads due to knock. And at the lower power ratings, power percentages, we can see that you could theoretically introduce a large amount of alternative fuel. However, the efficiency would be low. Really a quick word about the problems of knock. I don't want to be too technical, but this is important to understand. If we look at the two figures at the bottom, the left one, these figures are showing heat release rate. So how the heat is released from combustion relative to crank angle degrees of the engine. So 0 crank angle degrees in this case is when the piston is at top dead center, at the uppermost part of its travel. Now, on the left, we see normal dual fuel combustion. You can see the heat release rate is quite uniform. There aren't a lot of peaks. and this is the desired result. On the right, we can see abnormal combustion or pre-ignition. And what you can see is that there is a partial heat release before top dead center. So what this basically means is the piston is still traveling up. There is pressure being built against it. And this is a phenomena that can be harmful to the engine. Its outward expression is knock. You can hear the sound of knocking. So of course, we want to prevent this. Typical applications for these dual fuel systems are gensets that we're going to talk about today, but this is also applicable to any vehicle or machine using a diesel engine, marine vessels, trucks, tractors, etc. If you seen other dual fuel conversion kits or other dual fuel engines, most of them today are focusing on CNG, compressed natural gas. Okay, about our system. So the basic philosophy of our system is that you can start using the e-fuels without large investment in new equipment or infrastructure. Our kit is an add-on kit for existing equipment. It is a single point injection system, as I described earlier. And this is the best kind, in our opinion, because it requires the least amount of physical changes to the engine itself. The modifications are limited to the intake system. As you can see here on the right, that's one of our prototypes. So only the intake pipe is modified. We have tested this system with methanol and ethanol. I know that in other parts of the US, ethanol is of interest. Here today we're talking about methanol. And it can be adapted to other fuels, including gases that we are testing at the moment. As I said, our focus today is on gensets, but it can be adapted to other applications. Another feature of our system is that the alternative fuel system is housed outside of the generator canopy, and we have our cabinet that contains the fuel pumps and the control system outside of the original installation. This system can be switched off at any time and 100% diesel operation resumed. And as I described before, we are highly focused on safety. We do not want to damage any of the equipment. So we have a very sophisticated knock and pre-ignition detection system, overspeed protection, fuel leak detection, and our system has an emergency self-shutdown capability. If we talk about improvements, then we can manipulate the original ECU on engines that have ECUs, and this would allow for an even bigger amount of diesel fuel to be replaced. And that is what we are focusing on at the moment. Okay, now in this slide really is what we believe is our main advantage over our competition. What we want to do basically is to harness the power of machine learning for real-time optimization of the system. And we do it in the following way. First of all, we come to a new machine, we install our system, and there is an automatic base calibration phase per fuel as the engine operates. That establishes the basic calibration for the specific engine. Afterwards, we continuously experiment with the available degrees of freedom, of course, within the safety margins, to allow for the best results and the most efficient results for the particular operating condition. And if any of the conditions change, this is revisited and optimized again. Other than that, we collect data long term, and this is very beneficial for early fault detection. And a future capability we're interested in developing is what's referred to as predictive maintenance, using data of the engine running to predict when maintenance should be performed instead of the very rigid manufacturer operating hour intervals. So our system is highly flexible and efficiency is predicted to improve over time. You can see here on the right, the alternative fuel is injected. This reduces the diesel fuel injection and this combusts. We collect the data. Our intelligent controller adapts the parameters for best efficiency, and this cycle repeats. Again, that's what we believe is our main advantage over our competition. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the economic potential, because if there's no money to be made, then this is only an academic, proposal. So what I'm showing you here is based on our 200 kilowatt genset prototype. You can see it here on the right. It's currently running at the Dor's facility in Haifa, and the plant is using the electricity. The calculations here, of course, if methanol is cheaper and diesel is more expensive, then this changes. But for this reference scenario, I used the $2.5 for methanol, a gallon of methanol, and $7.5 for a gallon of diesel fuel. And the maximum savings available are 15%. Let's have a look at this figure here on the right. The x-axis is the percent power of the rated power of the engine. The right side perpendicular axis is MSR, methanol substitution ratio. And on the left side is the cost reduction in percentage. Now, as we can see, first of all, let's look at the methanol substitution ratio, which is the orange figure. You can see that at the lower power ratings, the lower loads, I can introduce a pretty large amount of methanol. The substitution ratio is high. However, the cost savings are low because of poor efficiency, as we discussed. On the right-hand side, you can see that after around, 60 or 70% of rated load, the amount of methanol I'm introducing declines rapidly because of NOx that limits this. And again, the savings are minimized. And the best operating area for the most cost reduction is, of course, in the mid-range. And typically, this is also where gensets live or operate. A word about ROI. In this test scenario for our prototype system, we evaluate it at about 3 months. Of course, it depends on how you operate your generator. And we have many improvements lined up, long-term adaptivity, as I've discussed, and newer engines that have the electronic diesel injection control. These figures will grow. Some words about emissions and the implications. So the dual fuel system, I'm talking about methanol as a fuel right now, has this effect on the emissions. NOx and particulate matter is reduced. However, on the flip side, CO and hydrocarbon emissions are increased. What we do to deal with this is very simple. We use very well-established and known after-treatment devices, in this case, an oxidation catalyst, and it is part of the kit that is installed on the engine. JR said a little bit about the EPA. I will repeat it quickly. As I will show you in a minute, the system doesn't have adverse effect on emissions, and this is consistent with the EPA anti-tampering policy. And a reasonable basis for this claim can be proven by emission testing, which would probably have to be done for each type of engine family. There is a memo about this I've written down here. If you are interested, you can look it up. Okay, so here I'm presenting to you our smaller engine prototype where we tested the catalytic oxidation catalyst, really to show in a real test the things that I said before. So if we look at the left of the screen, the left figure, these are NOx emissions. I have here 4 measurements working with diesel only before the catalytic converter and after it, and working dual fuel before and after. As you can see, with the diesel operation, the catalytic converter has almost zero effect on NOx emissions. And working with the dual fuel mode, NOx is reduced, also hardly affected by the oxidation catalyst. PM emissions on the right, also we can see a very big improvement, especially as power is increased. We can see here in the yellow and gray lines, this is in dual fuel operation. And this makes sense because we're reducing diesel combustion, which is responsible for this PM emissions. As I said, our problems are with CO and hydrocarbon emissions. And you can see here that after the catalytic converter in dual fuel operations, we are very similar to the numbers that we have using diesel only in both hydrocarbon and CO. Now, the question that arises from looking at these figures is what happens at the lower loads? Why at the lower loads this isn't the case? And the answer is that on this particular prototype, the installation of the catalytic converter was not optimal. It wasn't as close as it could be to the exhaust exit of the engine, and thus at the lower loads, the exhaust wasn't hot enough, and the catalytic reaction didn't happen. So on the larger engines on future installations that are not this prototype, this is expected not to happen, and you will be able to work at the lower loads, of course, only at the substitution ratios that make sense and that are efficient. Okay, why do we see potential in Alaska? Well, I think there is great potential for our system in Alaska. First, because diesel power generators are prevalent and are often the main power source for the rural communities. There is a history of federal energy grants for alternative fuel projects. And the Alyeschem plant will produce the methanol locally. So this will very much simplify and reduce the costs of distribution. This is very attractive. And also I can identify some technical advantages to using the system in Alaska. Specifically, there are no cold start problems because the engine is started on diesel fuel. If you are familiar, methanol has a problem. When you use 100% methanol, there is a problem with cold start. Under around 10 degrees Celsius, it's almost impossible to start the engine on methanol. So this dual fuel system addresses that. And another thing, interesting thing that we've seen consistently is when the temperatures, ambient temperatures are lower, we can move the upper limit, the NOx limit, higher. This means we can increase our substitution rate at higher loads. And we have seen this in Israel, where winter is a joke compared to winters that you have. So we expect to see similar things when we test in Alaska. Okay, thank you very much. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Guy. That was fascinating. I was ready to get an injection kit. It's pretty interesting. I would love to open it up here for questions. I'm hearing an echo of myself somewhere. Any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Guy, had the diesel generator set that you tested this on, was it mechanically injected or was it electronic injected?
Right. The engine we had in our prototype, the larger one, the 200 kilowatt, was a inline type mechanical fuel injection. And that's the savings that I displayed. And of course, if it was electronic, this could be improved further.
Have you guys tried testing this with HVO, hydrotreated vegetable oil, in place of diesel fuel to see what your emissions, how they might decrease?
Not in this particular project. Dor has tried producing this type of fuels, and it was not very successful. So at the moment, we don't have a lot of experience with this type of biodiesel fuels, etc. But it's something that can be tried. You know, the diesel engine injection system is untouched by us, so there's no reason for it not to work.
And you haven't seen any kind of weird responsiveness problems with single port injected? Do you offer multi-port injection systems on compression ignited systems?
Yeah, our system at the moment is only single port. And again, this is owing to the philosophy of not wanting to interfere too much in the existing machinery. If you wanted multi-port injection, you would probably have to make a new intake manifold where it joins the engine head, etc. And this is more complicated. Yes, there are benefits to this, but in our eyes, the drawbacks are larger than the benefits. So at the moment, it's only a single point. And maybe if we say the main problem that can arise with a single point is if the original intake manifold is very not symmetrical, and if you use very high substitution ratios, you might get large variability between the cylinders, and the engine doesn't work very well. So of course, we have to address this, and our system is calibrated as to not have this problem.
Got it. Yeah, that was my main question, because diesels only draw in air; they don't draw in a fuel air mixture, and a lot of times you don't see tuned intake runners on diesel engines. So that potential where two cylinders could get way more fuel than another set of two. Okay, cool. That's all I had. Thank you.
And that's what port injection can help with.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to the next hand I see raised, which is Halen.
Hey, thanks for an awesome presentation. This was really interesting. A few questions. I may have missed it at the beginning, but where are you as far as deploying this technology? Is this something that folks with diesel gensets can place orders for today? You kind of also hinted at an ROI, so I was curious, like ballpark pricing that it would be offered at.
Yeah, okay. So at the moment, our focus was on the Israeli market, where prices are obviously different. And there's a pretty large regulatory hurdle in Israel. If you want to have more than, I think, 50 or 100 liters of methanol, you need a special license from the Ministry of Environment to be able to hold this much material, because it's considered poison. So this is our main problem in deploying in Israel. At the moment, we have 3 systems operating in our plants. Our plants have this approval, and these systems are currently running. And we're looking to expand this once we can get over this regulatory hurdle. Regarding pricing, it's a bit difficult for me to say right now for 2 reasons. First, our system is in a prototype stage, and of course, is not a series production system, so the price is higher to begin with. And second, my let's say the scenario simulation that I showed you today is based on what we have in Israel, and I'm not yet sure if we were to market this in the US, what would be the final cost. But just to give a feeling, using the numbers that we currently have as a business case in Israel, 3 months is something that we are confident in saying. And of course, this will decrease as more systems are produced and the price goes down.
And a quick follow-up, this might just be a bit of confusion on my part, but yeah, how do you imagine dealing with methanol storage requirements for facilities that are used to storing diesel?
So there are, and for us also, there are established standards to building methanol tanks. We have several of them in the plants and also in our test cell area. And I'm not familiar with the regulation you have in the US or in Alaska regarding methanol storage and tanks, but I'm sure this is something that has clear regulation and can be adapted accordingly. I believe that tanks are really the easiest problem.
And if I could chime in just for a moment on that, one of the primary places we would look to deploy these first would be on the North Slope, where methanol is the most common chemical dealt with. So there are already a lot of methanol tankage. If we're deploying it in areas where there's not typically methanol, it's trucked in much the same way that gasoline is. It's a flammable liquid, but it's not explosive. And you just need sometimes a little different bit of a line or a tankage material because it can be more corrosive, more like a water tank in some ways, but it's not tremendously more technically complex to handle. That's as being a flammable liquid that's stable at normal temperatures and pressures.
Cool.
Perfect.
Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, I was hoping you would chime in there, JR, on the methanol storage. Before we go to Tim, I saw Bob B raising his hand physically before Tim's electronic hand came up. Bob, did you want to chime in with a quick question?
Well, I think the question really was relative to ROI, because now I don't know if because you're in the methanol business, maybe you're going to just give this to people so they'll buy the methanol from you, which is a great business model. But that's really the question. And I want to commend, this is something that I've been working on for about 5 years, and this is really an excellent presentation. Your documentation is wonderful and very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Tim.
Thanks. Yeah, 2 questions. The first on the application side of things, and I'm thinking about not stationary, I'm thinking about mobile, for transportation here. With that decreased energy density, have you done some kind of rough estimates on the range impact if we're talking about like a tractor trailer application here? Knowing that there's a blend, I'm guessing there's some sort of not a direct correlation. It's not half the range. Have you done some of those estimates? Is it like 3/4 of the range we're talking about when you blend in some methanol?
Well, since we're talking about 2 different fuel systems, so I guess the range depends on what's the size of the methanol tank that you would be installing on your machine. I don't know exactly to give an exact figure, but just to say regarding non-stationary engines, as a start for this technology, diesel gensets were very attractive to us, mainly because, of course, they're stationary and they are fixed speed engines. With varying speed engines and moving machinery, there is another degree of complication. First, for transient operation, in which you have to be very precise in how you introduce the fuel. Otherwise, you can have very big problems. And when machinery is moving, also there is a safety concern. If you introduce too much fuel and suddenly the machine lurches forward. So this is something, the system can be adapted. At the moment, we don't have a working prototype of a non-stationary machine, but this is something we're looking into as a future development.
Thank you. And, I was thinking about a tractor trailer with, maybe it's a 150-gallon tank on board, maybe that gives you roughly 1,000 miles or, 1,500 miles of range or 2,000, depending on your load. The second question, though, comes back to that regulatory hurdle. And this is, you can tell I'm not an engineer here. I'm thinking about policy. Thinking about what ethanol has gone through, at least in the US, are there some broad lessons learned that either, you or maybe JR can take from the ethanol campaigns that have been fairly successful how many JRs do we need that would be equivalent to, the soy or corn farmers in the Midwest? Is there a lobby, if you will, of partners creating the methanol who could help influence that policy and how quickly we overcome that regulatory hurdle?
JR, I think you would be more knowledgeable than
Well, so I think that the Guy and Dor are also working with some Renewables Fuel Alliance and some people who are more from the ethanol space in the lower 48, trying to, because this same exact system is a solution for introducing more ethanol into the fuel mix and methanol. So I'd say that our that we're actually kind of aligned with the corn farmers on this. But whereas ethanol from a long-term sense, that needs to be created from fermentation. You can create methanol from so many different feedstocks, from natural gas to landfill gas to creating it directly out of CO2 and hydrogen. So that when we start talking about some of the concerns that this group is concerned of, kind of look at that transition to a truly renewable future. The methanol has a lot to offer because it's something that you can keep making out of cleaner and lower carbon feedstocks without constantly changing the engine and the fuel distribution and everything. And so, this is one, sort of the thin end of the wedge of being able to introduce more of those hydrogen carriers into the fuel system in a way that can save people money today. The obstacle that's been faced by pretty much everyone, and this is ethanol. If you're trying to do a straight ethanol fired engine, a methanol fired engine, I'm trying to use ammonia, hydrogen, you run into engine certification. So before you can legally sell or import an engine into the United States, the EPA needs to certify it. And whereas in many countries, the government or some sort of NGO takes the lead on the engine certification, in the US, all that burden is borne by the manufacturer. And that means that before I can just market a methanol engine in America, even if it is fully certified to work in Europe or China or Japan or Israel or wherever, I would need to go through a multi-million-dollar, multi-year process of proving to the EPA by their testing methods that engine can be broadly sold in the United States. The only alternative is to do routine source testing on that particular engine on a regular basis, which is cost prohibitive if you're trying to work on the sort of the smaller mid-scale of engine. So what's really attractive about this approach, I sort of alluded to this earlier, is that this is as a modification to an existing engine. One just needs to document a reasonable basis. And this is what Guy was referring to under that tampering memo published by the EPA. So the essential process is that you have to do the testing in order to satisfy EPA that it will, two metrics. One, it needs to be cleaner than the existing operation, which this is. And the second is that the engine will last as long. And also because methanol reduces the operating temperature of the engine, one of the advantages is this should increase engine longevity by putting less heat stress on some of this. So we know this can be done. But there's a process of having to work with this, working through the manufacturer to ensure that you're not voiding warranties, working with customers to make sure that they see that this will operate in cold weather and give them the power they need when they need it. But I think Alaska is uniquely well set up to benefit from this. As I mentioned, drill rigs are one of the top things we look at. They already have dual fuel systems because historically they use two different kinds of diesel. The two kinds of emissions that they're most worried about are NOx and particulate matter, which methanol is very good at reducing. And then the cost advantages should really work out well on the North Slope, and then following close behind that, rural power generation, because it offers a really relatively low capex way of starting to clean emissions by just using a less expensive and cleaner fuel. And, you know, in the longer term, this is opening the door for hydrogen to actually have a realistic path to market without having to dramatically change our fuel distribution or utilization systems.
Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in real quick, like JR. So what's the path to getting these add-on systems in the US? Is it fairly straightforward? Do we just purchase them, or are there further hurdles?
I mean, I think and Guy, please chime in if you see this differently. But you know, Alyeschem and Dor are working together, you know, specifically because we see this as something that can be done in the relatively near term, and are excited about working on together. One of the first things in front of us is to create what EPA would call a quote reasonable basis. So that involves some testing inside the US, and then sort of creation of a document that could be then submitted to the EPA, and then also to any potential customers showing why this is a legal thing to do. And then there's also just the work of working with, you know, making sure that warranties aren't being voided and that customers are confident in the performance of what you'd be selling to them. And then, you know, just figuring out the logistics of, okay, how do you actually, you know, manufacture this, sell this, move it to Alaska, and install it on an engine. But these are, you know, these are things that can be solved on a fairly short-term basis, not a multi-year basis.
Okay. Thanks. UAF ASAP office, I see your hand up.
Thanks a lot for your presentation, Guy. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
I'm curious, I also really liked the plots that you showed where you can look at sort of the efficiency versus when you get into that knocking region with your rated power, as well as the cost trade-off or your cost savings.
This one.
Yep. So it seems like you have kind of a somewhat narrow or selective window where you really want to be using as much of your methanol as possible. Can you give some insight into how easily this system can be modulated to reduce or increase the methanol in the intake as you need to ramp up or down your rated power? And also maybe how it compares to other dual fuel engines, specifically those with natural gas?
Right.
If you have that.
So referring to natural gas, again, I'm not an expert. We have not had many experience with natural gas, but usually in a natural gas engine, you have a pipeline coming from a factory or a large reservoir, and some kind of very large ball valve or throttle valve that is open and closed, and the gas flows continuously into the intake. On our system, using liquid fuels, we use fuel injectors, off-the-shelf fuel injectors, Bosch fuel injectors, and they are controlled by our controller. The controller has inputs for engine speed and load and other sensor readings that are relevant. And via these readings, it decides how much methanol to inject by opening the injector, you know, modifying the pulse. So this is directly linked to the power. Another thing is, as I said earlier, we have a bit of a problem with transients. We don't want to cause problems during transient. So let's say we increase the engine load, the larger amount for the new load would not be introduced immediately. There's some sort of a ramp up just to aid with this initial change of conditions. So that's regarding that. And as I said, our machine learning capability is all the time trying to increase, decrease, and try and really pinpoint where the most efficient operating point will be for the specific load. And yeah, in the mid-range, this is the best efficiency and where you can save the most. From our experience, most genset owners want to work in this area because if you always work at the low loads, you can get a lot of carbon buildup in your engine. And if you work at the high loads, then the engine wears out sooner. So we think for this application, it's pretty well suited.
So it sounds like right now you're relying on a manual plant operator to sort of make that judgment call of when to be increasing or decreasing your methanol injection.
No, it's completely automatic.
Oh, it's complete. Okay, I misunderstood. Okay.
The load increases. Let's take, for example, Dor plant in Haifa that I'm showing this generator here. The plant, this generator, specific one, runs a pump and runs a fan. Okay, let's simplify it. When they want to turn on the fan, when the pump is already running, the load increases, and the system automatically adjusts for the new point. There is no operator that's sitting in tuning. You know, that was one of our main focuses. In the initial prototypes, I sat down next to every engine and tuned it. I don't want to do that. It's too labor intensive. So the system would be automatic. It would, ideally be sent to the customer, installed, automatically calibrated, self-calibration, and then trying to increase, while using machine learning algorithms, trying to increase and decrease the amounts to get to this most efficient point.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I see a question in the chat. Tim, do you want to just ask that question in person?
Sure. Yeah, just thinking about that sweet spot that you're talking about here, and wondering if a hybrid system with batteries to help reduce on either tail, on the low load or on the high load, reduce that essentially so you can keep the dual fuel system in that sweet spot. Have you looked at what potential diesel hybrid electric system with dual fuel could offer for you?
That's a very, very good question. Of course, we have considered this. At the moment, due to shipping problems, the situation in Israel right now, it's very, very expensive to get proper batteries into the country. So this is delayed. But of course, this is something that we are looking into. It's a very, very promising use case.
Maybe we should test that here, JR, when you do your tests.
I mean, that's not a bad idea, Aaron. I mean, I think that we have a lot of potential for being able to do some of this, last step before market research here.
Bob, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, Guy, thank you again. I guess one of the questions I've got, because you've shown both the efficiency side plus the emissions side, what do you see? And obviously every location, environment, use is going to be different, but do you see this being mostly justified on a cost point of view, or because regulatory issues are forcing people to reduce harmful emissions?
Okay, yeah, good question. Our business case, and we believe that there has to be an economic potential to the system by itself. We don't believe that you can rely on subsidies or governments chipping in for this transition. We think that the basic economic proposition should be good enough. Now, this exists in several countries. Again, it's very dependent on the price of the fuel. In Israel right now, we can say, not as much as I have shown here with the numbers provided by JR, but at a lower percentage. And it's really our philosophy that this should be economically viable and not rely on government subsidy. However, of course, it is very, in many parts of the world, they are talking right now about incentivizing alternative fuels and the emission reduction. So this is something that can only help, with the implementation of a system, with making it more economically viable. Yeah, so again, a basic, value proposition, and adding on to that, whatever incentive is offered per country that we want to work.
And if I might just chime in on that, there really are, you know, this should be a cost savings. It should also lead to significant environmental benefits. And I think a third thing that's worth underlying in the Alaska context is, you know, this methanol is a fuel you can make out of natural gas. So you know, this is a pathway for monetization of Alaska's stranded natural gas resources, also an ability to use that. And that's one of the reasons why it could be almost immediately price advantaged compared to diesel, because you're making it out of, you know, ultimately gas in the near term, and then longer term as we're able to bring, you know, more renewables and more hydrogen from other sources online progressively. You can use other sources, which we also have, you know, abundant opportunities for in the state. So I think that's kind of sort of a third, you know, win on why this is so attractive.
Yeah. Well, and hey, one other thing I think that, you know, and maybe JR, you've shared this, or Guy, you're aware of it, but in certain situations, rather than bring in a brand new, the most efficient engine, it's more advantageous for somebody to bring in an older engine that doesn't have to meet that high standard that a brand new engine has. And in places like Alaska, where especially remote locations, you know, bringing in a new engine is really, really, really expensive. So there is an added benefit to what you're providing here.
Yeah, I agree with you totally.
Oh, go ahead. Just out of curiosity, JR and Guy, how did you two get connected?
Well, I think JR initially connected with our CEO, Michael. JR, was it through our contact page or in another way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was through the internet originally that became aware of
Okay.
their existence, but then sort of reached out, and we've been sort of developing the relationship over the last few months. And you know, we've seen the opportunity, you know, for trying to get methanol into the fuel mix here for some time, and we were very excited about Dor's product as being, you know, something that could be deployed in the near term.
That's terrific. All right, one more question. We're at the top of the hour, but Michael, if you have something really quick, please go ahead. Michael, you're muted.
So I just wanted to mention to Bob, there's an EPA exemption for rural utilities in Alaska, so there's not a requirement for Tier 4 final. A brand new Tier 3 marine engine will suffice as a replacement for Tier 4 final, so there's no EGR, there's no VGT. So rural Alaska isn't bound by those stringent requirements. And also I wanted to follow up with Tim. You had mentioned a battery hybrid system. We do have a product line. It's a small BESS that's designed to work with a lean burn, slow response, slow start gas generator set to help with some of those transient response issues that some of those have. So, I mean, there are some products available to help out with what you had mentioned. And yeah, that's all I had. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right. I predict lots of follow-up conversations here. We are going to wrap this up. I thank everybody for their participation. This was an excellent presentation. Lots of food for thought. Hope to see you all again on Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day, for our next monthly meeting. We'll try to come up with something super engaging to take your minds off the election for an hour and a half. And with that, I'm going to close it out and wish you all a great rest of the month, and be safe, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks, all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you.